This is my Criterion RV-6 Dynascope. As you can see, the tube is fairly rough. I'm going to be working on repairing it, stripping it down. This video will show you how this rough tube is going to be repaired.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Telescope Maker's Workshop. My name is Francis O'Reilly and I'll be your host today as we discuss the restoration of a RV-6 Dynascope from Criterion. It's a beautiful day in Hartford, Connecticut area. Today is May 12th, 2012, and I'm sitting in my friend's backyard right now taking the paint off this old tube. It's quite a project. The tube is probably close to 40 years old, and the paint has seen better days. Most of it had already chipped off, or not a substantial amount of it had already chipped off, and at the moment I'm just trying to clean it up to repair some holes. As you've seen in the prior pictures that I've had with this telescope, and pictures that'll be forthcoming, it's quite a project. And what I'm doing is I'm using a single-edged razor blade just to chip the paint. It's been a very long process, and it's probably going to continue to be a very long process. But it's just a matter of chipping the paint. I've taken all the parts off, the mirrors out, the secondary mirrors out, the diagonal holder is out, the spot, what's commonly known as a spider, is out. Everything's out. The focuser, as you can see, is off. And as you can see, there's some holes here. 1, 2, 3, 4. The top 2 holes were where the finder was mounted. The bottom 2 holes are where a camera holder was mounted. There was a Telrad put over this. I'm going to restore this telescope to its original state, and it's going to be quite a process. Now, these tubes were made out of what was advertised. I thought it was phenolic. My friend Alan told me that he thought it was bakelite. Whatever it is, I'm looking at it, and it really just appears to be resin-impregnated cardboard sonotube in all likelihood. I don't think there's any fiberglass over it. I think it was just resin-impregnated cardboard. However, I want to keep it as original as possible, and I'd like to use the original tube, so I'm going to scrape all this paint off, repair the holes with fiberglass and Bondo auto body filler, and repaint it, and then hopefully reinstall original Criterion accessories. I'm probably going to replace all the fasteners, since the fasteners that are on there were clearly not original fasteners. This telescope has pretty clearly been repaired and redone a number of times. It was once owned by a university, I believe the University of North Carolina, and I think the students over the years, some abused it, some took care of it, but it was in pretty rough shape when I got it. Generally speaking, when you take paint off, when you chip paint off, you want to chip it off axially. You don't want to take a chance on going longitudinally and gouging out a hole, whereas if you do it axially with a single-edged razor blade, you're getting a better purchase. In other words, more area of the blade is touching the paint as opposed to going on a tangent and getting a very small area where you're likely to concentrate a lot of force and create a gouge. Here it's less likely to gouge. Not that a gouge can't be repaired, and not that you're not occasionally going to have to go longitudinally, as I am here, right here by the identification tag. And by the way, this does have a serial number. The serial number is 2368. And that's the Dynascope serial number. I'll have to see if I can't look it up and get a little more information on this telescope someday, if that information is available. And this is a very lengthy process. I've been working at it for about an hour and a half now. I've made some good progress, but I've got a long ways to go. I think, as I've said, this is probably more exciting than watching mud dry, but not quite as exciting as watching the lights blink on the refinery downtown. As you can see, there's some paint that comes off relatively easily. There's other paint that does not. It's been there for a long time, and it's been sanded in, and it's just going to take some effort. But before I finish this, I want all the paint off, as you'll see in the upcoming photos when I get it done. I've been working for about an hour since I turned off the tape. I've made some progress, and I'm restoring this telescope. I'm taking off all of the old paint, and I'm going to repaint it. Now, one of the things you have to remember when you're restoring a telescope, or anything for that matter, is that the restoration had better be better than the original was. As I restore this, as I take it down, I'm noticing imperfections. It was a mass-produced telescope. It was a good telescope, but there are always minor imperfections. You can't have minor imperfections in a reproduction. People will notice and say, it's a piece of garbage, your reproduction work is terrible. Well, your reproduction work really should be perfect, and that's what we're working at here. Right now, I'm just taking off the paint. I need to get all of it off because I don't want any lumpiness. Taking it off with a single-edged razor, and I'm just following the wraps of the tube around and slowly but surely getting off all the paint. Now, you have to make sure that you use plenty of hand pressure on your single-edged razor blade, and that's going to, cause you some, if you don't work with your hands normally, that's going to cause you some discomfort in your hands. Your hands are going to get tired. What's happening is that's the weakness leaving your body, leaving your hands. And your hands are going to have muscles. Now, if you work for a living, at a desk, that's not such a common thing. I'm an attorney, as many of you know. And one of the things I hate is those weak, wimpy attorney hands when I shake people's hands. I've got some muscles in my hands because I've been doing this, and that's a good thing. So just keep working at it if you're doing this. Don't be afraid to let your hand be tired. Be careful not to gouge anything. Pay attention to what you're doing. Get all the paint off. Don't leave any lumps whatsoever. And understand it's going to take some time. That's just the way it is. If you're going to do this project, it's worth doing it right. Be very careful with the razor blade. You don't want to hurt yourself. It can cause a bad cut. Work axially as much as possible, in other words, parallel to the axis of the tube. Work longitudinally if you have to, but be careful not to gouge anything. I'm just staying one strip wide and going all the way around the tube. Probably about 7 or 8 total wraps here. And this is a 7-inch tube, so as we all remember from algebra, it's 22 inches in circumference. 22 inches in circumference, 54 inches long. It's over 1,000 square inches of tube to clean up, an inch at a time. So it's going to take you some time. Now I'm going to go actually a little bit on some of the spots. Just keep working it. Patience is important. You don't want to miss anything. Attention to detail. They used to say the devil is in the detail until a friend of mine who's a court clerk down in the Bronx reminded me that the angels are in the detail. God is in the detail. I've always kind of thought about that.
As you can see, the tube has now been taken down. All the paint is removed, and it's now ready for me to fiberglass the holes that are in it that should not be there, that have accumulated over the last 40-some years. Once those are done, I'll Bondo it, sand it, repaint it, and then it will be ready to be used again. I'll remount the optics, hopefully remount a finder scope and the focuser, and this telescope should be in pretty good shape then. There are still several challenges ahead, which we will address in later videos with respect to this tube. Well, that's it for this edition of the Telescope Maker's Workshop.